Nicola Sturgeon joining us now. Hello to you, Ms Sturgeon. Thanks for joining us. Also, we put it to Labour this morning about the promise or hope for a second referendum in the form of Lisa Nandy. She said, you've got some brass neck. What would you say in response?
I'm a Democrat. I was elected First Minister. My government was elected just over a year ago on a proposition to give people in Scotland the choice of independence, recognising the significant changes that have taken place in the UK since Scotland last had that opportunity, recognising the fact that Westminster, with governments we don't vote for here in Scotland, taking us in the wrong direction. There is a majority, clear majority in the Scottish Parliament behind that proposition, so it's a matter of democracy, that people should have the right to choose, and then whether or not people choose independence or not is a matter not for politicians, whether that's me, Ben Wallace or Lisa Nandy. That's a matter for the Scottish people. And I suspect if my political opponents actually believed what they say, that Scotland doesn't want independence, then they would not be so desperate to block Scotland's opportunity to have that choice.
Well, you said in 2014, as we all know, that this was a once-in-a-generation referendum. I wonder what the clear mandate is that you're talking about. I was looking in the Daily Record saying that there have been 23 polls in the last year, and yes has led in only 3 of them.
Well, let me take head on this once-in-a-generation point. In 2014, at the last referendum, now almost a decade ago, those of us arguing for independence, yes, said to people, make sure you don't lose this opportunity, we might never get the chance again. But no politician can stand in the way of democracy. Democracy is not a single fixed moment in time. People in a democracy have the right to change their minds if circumstances change. And nobody can argue that circumstances have not changed since 2014. You know, back then, Scotland was told we would lose European Union membership if we voted for independence, and now we're out of the European Union because we didn't become independent. That's happened against our will. We were told the prospect of Boris Johnson ever becoming Prime Minister was ridiculous. That may have been true, but it is nevertheless a reality now. And yet again, we have a Westminster government pulling us in the wrong direction, creating the worst cost of living crisis in the developed world almost because of Brexit, and Scotland is expected to just say, well, you know, there's nothing we can do about that. So this is about democratic choice. It's not up to me whether Scotland becomes independent, but it is up to me to fulfil the promise I made to people in Scotland and was elected on, to offer people that choice. And you can quote opinion polls, I can quote opinion polls back at you, but what I'm actually standing on is the outcome of a democratic election. There is a stronger mandate for an independence referendum in the Scottish Parliament than there ever was for a Brexit referendum in the UK Parliament. A majority of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament support a referendum. So if we are a democracy, then that should be respected. And then, of course, it is up to people in Scotland whether they vote for independence or against independence. That is how to resolve issues in any democracy.
I was speaking to the government minister yesterday, and he said, Chris Phelps, he was saying that what you should be doing is concentrating more on drug deaths in Scotland. And we took the opportunity to look at the figures. Drug deaths in Scotland, 35 times worse than they are in France, 15 times worse than they are in Germany. That's where you should be focused.
We are focused on that, and I want to come on in a second to the link between independence and some of these day-to-day issues that are priorities for people. But we are focused on these things every single day. There are sort of long reasons with deep roots in terms of Scotland's drug death situation, but it is unacceptable. So we're investing £250 million in better treatment, faster treatment, better rehabilitation, better community support to turn that around. I've appointed a dedicated minister to lead this work. We are taking this seriously. Of course, one of the things that there is cross-party support around in Scotland, and we're trying to find a way to do it, is to establish something that has been shown to work in other countries, which is safe consumption facilities. We're unable, or have been unable, to do that straightforwardly through a change in legislation because the Misuse of Drugs Act is reserved to the Westminster Parliament. So I'm not seeking to escape responsibility on the drugs deaths issue, but even on that, the fact that the Scottish Parliament is not independent has real implications. But finally, Kay, on this issue of it's a choice between focusing on day-to-day priorities or focusing on independence. Independence is about better equipping Scotland to deal with and navigate the challenges we face. We're struggling with a cost of living crisis right now, which is worse in the UK than it is in any other G7 country, precisely because of Brexit, something imposed on Scotland against our will. My government is investing almost £3 billion a year to help people with the cost of living. We've established a Scottish child payment. Doesn't exist anywhere else in the UK.
Okay.
And yet, as we do that, we have a Chancellor at the stroke of his pen pushing more children into poverty by taking money away from universal credit. So independence is about giving.
OK, child poverty has been rising under your watch, though, hasn't it? And 500,000 people on the NHS waiting list.
Let me. Can I take on that? Can I take? I'll come to the NHS in a second.
Yeah.
The child poverty point I need to address because, firstly, child poverty in Scotland is the lowest of all of the 4 UK nations, I think, at the last statistics. And that is because of the action we're taking. We've established a Scottish child payment, £20 a week to the lowest income families. No other government in the UK has done that. But child poverty is rising because so many of the decisions that determine that are taken at Westminster. So cuts to benefits, £20 a week being taken away from low-income families in the universal credit clawback. So that's an argument for equipping the Scottish Parliament with all of the powers that countries across the world who are already independent take for granted. And we published analysis just a couple of weeks ago showing that a range of countries comparable to Scotland, many smaller than us, most of them without the resources that Scotland have, are doing better economically and socially because they have the powers of independence. On the NHS, again, waiting times in the NHS in Scotland, accident and emergency, for example, shorter and in many ways doing better than the other countries in the UK. NHS staff, the highest paid in Scotland in the whole of the UK. We have significant problems in our National Health Service, largely because of the COVID pressures. They are not unique to Scotland, but we are supporting the NHS into and through recovery. But one of the things we are struggling with is a situation where Westminster governments, and it's Wales and Northern Ireland are suffering from this as well, as are parts of England, budgets that are being cut by a Chancellor who is pursuing austerity politics rather than investing. So we will be better able to deal with support for our public services if we are in charge of all of the levers that effectively determine the environment and the financial situation that we are operating within.
Worst ever scores in maths and science in 20 years.
Sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Worst ever scores in maths and science in 20 years.
We are, again, like all countries, we are focused on these challenges. But you take the attainment gap, for example, narrowing, again, like most countries, exacerbated by COVID. But if you take the attainment gap in access to university, which of course is a key measure of how schools are performing often, we have an independent commissioner for fair access to universities who in his report just a couple of weeks ago said that Scotland was leading the way in the UK, that what we had done was an unequivocal success, and we are narrowing, in fact we're meeting our targets to narrow the gap between the young people from deprived communities and wealthier communities in terms of the opportunities to get to university. So using the powers we have, we're not shying away from challenges. Each and every day we focus on these challenges. But my argument is we will be better able to meet those challenges and to meet the wider challenges that Scotland, in common with countries around the world, face if we don't have one hand tied behind our back and too often are being pulled in the wrong direction by Westminster governments that we don't vote for.
But it's up to the Supreme Court, isn't it? And they are unlikely to find in your favour for a second referendum. Well,
I mean, I think we should allow the Supreme Court to do its job, and I respect the rule of law.
Well, it's not the prerogative of a devolved government, is it, to call a referendum? That's the point, isn't it? And that's what they'll find.
Well, sorry, the whole point I'm making is that that is contested, but you cannot say that as a statement of fact because it hasn't been judicially determined. That's what we are, through the decision of the Lord Advocate in Scotland, are seeking to get at judicial determination of that point. It wouldn't be necessary, of course, if Boris Johnson and the UK government simply respected democracy and agreed the process to put a referendum beyond legal doubt. But I'm doing the responsible thing. A referendum has to be lawful. I'm not like Boris Johnson, who is, of course, breaching international law with his actions on the Northern Ireland Protocol. I respect the rule of law, which is why we are taking the path that I set out yesterday. That's the responsible thing to do. But I also respect democracy. Scottish democracy cannot be a prisoner of Boris Johnson or any UK Prime Minister. The people of Scotland must have the right to choose. It is then entirely up to the people of Scotland what that choice is. But trying to simply block democracy, as unionist politicians are doing, simply because they fear the verdict of the Scottish people, is not democratic, it's not acceptable, and ultimately it is simply not sustainable.
Always a pleasure, Ms Sturgeon. Thank you.